there guys, and welcome to my booktube channel. Today I want to talk about the books I read in January of 2024. January was an excellent reading month for me, and there were several reasons for that. And I think the main reason was that I decided to go on a social media ban. So I had no social media except for YouTube, and so I had plenty of time for reading, and it was absolutely fantastic. I read 11 books. I finished 10 of them. One of them I DNF'd. And then there are actually 2 books that I started at the end of the month that I'm taking over with me to February. But you can see that in my, if you want to know about my February TBR, I will try to remember to link it in the description. Otherwise, you can find it on my channel as the video before this one. But yeah, so January, it was quite diverse. The amount of books, like the type of books I read, the genre of the books, from classics to thriller to attempt at a romance and some play and non-fiction. Whoa, the word disappeared. But okay, let's go over the books I read in January of 2024. The first book that I read was the best book I read in January, and it was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. So good. It's so good. 5 stars. I gave it 5 stars. Like, I loved it. I love Charlotte Bronte's writing style. I love that she talks to the reader and like involves you in it. And so if you don't know, it's about Jane Eyre, who is an orphan. She grows up with a very kind of heartless and mean aunt and her children. Then she's sent to this school for orphans that actually turns out better than she thought, and then her life kind of goes on from there. So she becomes a governess and meets this Mr. Rochester, blah blah blah, and it is obviously a romance. It's very romantic, and their love story is quite a big part of their of the book. But there's also just a lot of social commentary and just drama around social conventions, and I really like Jane Eyre as a character, and I think she was quite unusual for the time. I mean, the book was published in 1847, and Jane Eyre, or Charlotte, is writing her as quite the strong, independent woman, which was not necessarily the thing you did back then. But at the same time, she is very kind of innocent and vulnerable. So she's quite a complex character, I find. I had a little bit of a problem with Mr. Rochester. I don't know, I understand that he's really desperate, and that's why he does some of the things he does, but I did kind of start to like him as the book continued. But at first I was like, whoa, who is this guy, man? Like, no thank you. But I started to kind of at least accept him a little bit, and I can understand maybe why she fell in love with him. But anyway, I thought it was an excellent book. I loved it. I read it, or I listened to it as an audiobook, and I just couldn't stop. It was so good. 5 stars. The second book I want to talk about is actually a non-fiction, and it is River Kings: A New History of the Vikings from Scandinavia to the Silk Road. I'm not sure that I can agree that it's a new history of the Vikings. It's very much like, it's not like a broad history of the Viking Age. It's very focused on this brooch or this thing that they found somewhere in. So they found like a thing in a Viking grave in Britain, and the author is a bioarchaeologist using all sorts of forensic techniques and DNA and stuff like that to find things out. And so she's really just like talking about how far they traveled, kind of a little bit talking about the origins of the Rus, if those were actually also Vikings, or I mean they were, but like, yeah. Anyway, I'm not gonna go into depth about the book. I thought it was really interesting. I'm really interested in that time period, both in North Europe, but also in like Western and like Central Europe. I think it's really fascinating, everything that was happening kind of post the Roman Empire, and I thought it was really fun, and I enjoyed listening to it on an audiobook. As an audiobook, it was just a very fun and easy thing to read and listen to after Jane Eyre. I did read several thrillers and crime drama books in January, but few of them were Icelandic, so I'm gonna talk about them at the end of the video. But one of them that I read was this one, Aspire to Die by M.S. Morris, published in 2019. It is the first book in the Bridget Hart, D.I. Bridget Hart series. Takes place in Oxford, and everything about it sounds like a book that I would like. And there were a lot of things about it that I did like. I liked the plot twists and how things kind of, I was starting to think that, like, first I was like, oh my god, this one cannot be the murderer, that's so horrible. And then this one might have been the murderer, or this one, or this one. So I really liked the fact that the plot was quite good and well done, I think. I did not like D.I. Bridget Hart. I don't know what the author was doing. M.S. Morris, I don't know who that is actually, if that's like a woman or a man. Oh no, it's writing partnership of it's a couple, okay. Margarita and Steve Morris. I don't know, she was constantly talking about or thinking about how fat she was. Like, she'd gained weight, she hadn't lost the baby weight, even though her child was now 16, she was still fat after having had the baby, and she was still fat because she was always eating pasta and chocolate, and I was just like, stop with the fat thing already. Oh, it's so, I mean, I can understand that maybe they were just trying to make her like a real person, and this is obviously a thing that women think about a lot, unfortunately. It's been drilled into us that we're supposed to be super slim. But I don't know, it just kind of, it annoyed me. So I finished the book. I gave it 3 stars because of it, even though the plot was good. And I like the scenery. I mean, Oxford, who doesn't like a book that takes place in Oxford? But yeah, it was just, it really completely alienated me from the book. Her constantly talking about her weight and like what she was eating, and maybe she should have focused a little bit more on, you know, the fact that she was solving a murder. I don't know. There was at least there was something about this book that I didn't like, so I will not be continuing on with that Bridget Hart series for sure. Another thriller that I read, or listened to as an audiobook, was The Coffin Maker's Garden by Stuart McBride. I have read, I think, all the books by Stuart McBride. I really like him. He's a Scottish author, and he writes disgustingly violent, horrible serial killer books. I really like his Logan McRae series. He's like a DI something that I think I've read like 12 books where he is the main character. In this book, he's not the character. It is Ash Henderson, who is like a ex-detective. He's an ex-DI, but he left. I haven't found out why he left the police, but he had like a tragedy happen in his life, which probably caused him to leave. But he kind of works sometimes to help the police, like as a kind of advisor or a consultant type of a thing. And you know, here we have basically two serial killers. So there's they find this garden off the coast of Scotland that is basically being what is it called? Erased, or there's like erosion going on. So the coast is like being erased a little bit, and like so houses are basically falling into the sea. And so here we have a home that is falling into the sea, but then as it's falling down, people are seeing, or someone sees that he has like human remains buried in his garden, and they can't really examine that because it's just crumbling down and into the sea. So it's really, really like horrible. But then there's another murder going on there, like serial killer who's actually killing children. And I found the description of how he is killing these children, and like how it almost went too far. I feel actually kind of went too far in the description. It was not, I don't, if you are a very sensitive person, you should not read this book. Absolutely not. But anyway, so they are like kind of looking for both of these serial killers, and it's very violent. It's just horrible. I find that the police is just like, or like he is like bent on killing people who have killed all, I don't know. It's borderline too much, even for me. But I still enjoyed it. I was like, whoa, what is it? Whoa. Sometimes when I was listening to it, like, whoa, no, stop it. But I gave it 4 stars because I really did enjoy it, even though it was very violent. Very, very violent. And then we have Matilda by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. Oh, that was like laying on a velvet cloud, drifting around, or drifting on like a thingy on the ocean or something. Oh my God, it was so beautiful. It's almost just like a long poem. It's less than 100 pages, so it's quite short. I don't know if it's a novella rather than actually a novel, but it's like the prose or the writing of Mary Shelley. Oh, she was so good. I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously her husband was Percy Bysshe Shelley, who is a romantic poem, so she was in that circle, and she was obviously just as talented. And obviously she wrote Frankenstein, if you didn't know about that. But this was actually, I think this was actually her 2nd or 3rd book, but her father didn't want it to be published because it tells the story of a woman alienated from society by the incestuous passions of her father. But it's so beautifully written. I gave it 5 stars. Like, I was just like, oh, it's so beautiful. Now, I will admit that you have to be in a certain mood to read a book like that. I read it like it took me just like 3 days, I think, maybe 4 days, like in total, to read this book, because there was one day when I listened to it, it's an audiobook, and I was just like, oh, I can't, because you kind of almost, if you're not in the mood, you want to take Matilda by the shoulders and like shake her and like, get over it, woman, what's wrong with you? Stop your complaining. It's definitely very indulgent, oh, my life is so difficult type of a book. So I'm sure it's not for everybody. It gets like a 3.37 stars on Goodreads. I haven't read like the other reviews. I gave it 5 because I just thought it's a piece of art. It's like, yeah, it's just, whew, very good. And then we have this book. I finally read The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. So this was first published in 2011, but I feel that it got some, I don't know, TikTok fame in the last couple of years, maybe. I saw it on Instagram, people are always talking about it. I love Greek mythology, Roman mythology, Norse mythology. I love mythology in general, and yeah, so it didn't take a lot for me to actually read this, but I knew that it was kind of a romance, so I was kind of thinking, I wasn't sure, but I decided to go ahead and give it a go, and I really did enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. So at least in the first part of the book, I loved the love story there. How she describes that, you know, that when you have a crush on someone and you don't know if they like you back, so this uncertainty and like, can you look at him? No, you can't look at him. Can you look at him? You know, this, how she describes, and then like the first kind of realization that they kind of like each other, and I thought that was so well done. And I did like the love story throughout the book. I thought it was quite realistic. Sometimes, what's his name? Patroclus is a little bit like, you know, you want to like get a grip already, like, but anyway, I thought it was really well done, and it wasn't like whoa for me, but it was definitely 4 stars. It was a really good and enjoyable book, and I listened to it, as I said, and I just wanted to listen and not do anything else because I really enjoyed it. And then before I go on to the Icelandic books I read, I want to DNF the book. Yeah, I am determined to continue to try to find romance books that I like. Because like I said, I do like a really beautiful romance and a beautiful love story. They're always fun to read. So this book, The Road Through Rushbury by Martha Keyes, seemed to have everything. It's like Regency, I think, rather than Victorian era. You know, this main character who has been through 8 seasons in London and still doesn't have a husband, and her younger sister isn't allowed to go into society until she's married, and then anyway, and then so she decides to go and live with her aunt as her companion. And I think that part was really interesting, like the beginning of the book, like the Georgiana, is her name, sounded like a fun character. I liked kind of the banter between the family and her, like traveling to this town, to Rushbury. But the guy, what's his name, Samuel, he was just like obnoxious to me. And then I felt like the story, it could have been so interesting, but I felt like it just became this strong woman, annoyed man, and she does something and he hates it, and he does something and she hates it, and then they fall in love. Yeah, there was something missing for me. It was too predictable. Yeah, so I DNF'd it. I just couldn't. I can't. It's similar to, I think, the Bridgerton series. The reason why I don't like it is because there's just something in the writing style that just like makes me cringe. So this was my only DNF of the month. So that's excellent, because in general it was a really good reading month. And then we go into my Icelandic books. Let me start with Halldór Laxness, who is an Icelandic novelist, or was an Icelandic novelist or author. He wrote novels and poems and plays and essays and memoirs and all sorts of things. And he won the Nobel Prize in 1955. And this book, Independent People, is at least one of the books that helped him to win the Nobel Prize. It is, so I listened to it as an audiobook, and it was read by this, or narrated by this Icelandic actor, and he did it so well. He just made the story so interesting, and everything came to life. And so I'm not sure that I would have necessarily liked the book as much if I would have read it myself. But he kind of made it so that now I can't wait to read the rest of Laxness's books. But this book, Independent People, has been translated to all the languages, so you can definitely find it in English and in other languages. And it's about Bjartur, who is basically a peasant. Although he's trying to be an independent man, having his own little cottage with a couple of sheep, and trying to make a life for himself. And this book is such a criticism of, first of all, of Icelandic society. So it was published in 34 to 36 in 3 parts, and it takes place in the beginning of the 20th century up to the First War and until some years after the First World War. And it's basically about this really tough life of these really poor peasants who are trying to be independent. And the theme of independence is something that Halldór Laxness was really exploring in this book. It was a huge thing in Iceland at the time. For Iceland, we were fighting to become an independent country from Denmark. In 1918, we got sovereignty, but then we eventually got full independence. But so the independence movement, independence kind of thinking was very strong in the kind of cultural mind, and the people who were writing about it and doing all the kind of independent fighters, they really also used kind of the myth of the independent Viking who didn't want to live in Norway and pay taxes to this distant Norwegian king, so they strong men sailed across the sea to Iceland to settle new lands and be independent and that's very Icelanders are, I think, very independent and kind of individualistic, more so than the other maybe Nordic peoples. But yeah, and he's really playing with that, and he is is very critical of just this idea of that if you work hard and you you will make it. And that's just, the stock is that, like, the game is so rigged for people like Bjartur, who is poor. He has no chance really, and just a little thing happens, and the poor people lose the little thing they have. The rich people are protected, and he's really criticizing that. But that is, even though that's a big part of the book, the character like plots, the character of Bjartur is absolutely obnoxious. Like, he is so unlikable. He is independent, so he will starve rather than get food from somewhere else to feed his people. So if his family starves to death, that's fine, because at least they die independent. And it's just like, oh my God, he's such a horrible person, really. But at the same time, he has this deep love for his daughter, and their story and their relationship is just heart-wrenching. I cried and cried and cried while I was reading this book, and it's such a good book. And I would recommend everybody to read this book. It's so well written and just well done, and yeah, I loved it. 5 stars. Another book of Halldór Laxness that I read was Snæfríður Íslandssól, which is it's a play. I read it as a play, and like as a hard copy book, and he made it himself. Like, he adapted the play from a novel that he had written. So the novel is Iceland's Bell, that I'm actually gonna read in February, and it's about it kind of follows the story of this kind of poor farmer who is constantly in trouble with the authorities. This really beautiful woman, Snæfríður, which means snow beautiful, but it's a real name. And she's like the most beautiful woman in Iceland. This takes place in the early 18th century, 1706, 07, something like that. So it takes place in the early 18th century. And then there is this Icelandic, this man who went around Iceland collecting manuscripts of the sagas and Old Norse literature, Old Icelandic literature. And it's a fun play, and I really look forward to reading the novel. And I gave it 4 stars because it didn't like wow me like Independent People, but it was definitely interesting and fun to read. And then the last 2 books that I read were books I got for Christmas. They were both thrillers, and the first one is by Stefán Máni. It's called The City of the Dead, and it's really good. There's this police detective who is called to a house where they apparently found human remains in the ground, and then it follows like him figuring out that there's a serial killer. And it's a really good book. I really like this detective, Hörður, his name is, and I think this is like the several, he has been the detective has been the main character in other books by this author, and I haven't read all of them, so I definitely need to figure that out, because the detective actually was born in a village very close to my hometown. So that's fun, like a fun connection. Now in this book they actually go to my hometown, so that's fun. I don't know if it has been translated, or if any of his other books have been translated. I will put it on the screen, find out. But it was a really good book, and I gave it 4 stars. And then the last book that I want to talk about that I read was Hvítalok by Ragnar Jónasson. His books have definitely been translated into English, and actually there's a mini-series coming out based on a few of his books. And this is, so I was kind of confused about this book. This one, it hasn't been translated yet, but I'm sure it will be eventually. So in this book, one of the characters, the most famous crime author of Iceland, she disappears. An elderly lady at 70, she disappears. And it kind of connects with her disappearance, with a disappearance several decades ago, and murder, or like a bank robbery where a security guard was killed, and the detective's ex being like a stalker, and who had like, yeah, it was very, there was a lot of things happening, but this was not a crime thriller. I don't know why it's being marketed as a crime thriller, because it's not. It's an excellent like character study, and like there's and the character development and the plot is interesting. So I only gave it 3 stars because I was so disappointed with the fact that it wasn't a thriller. But I might review that and actually probably give it 4 stars, because it's actually a really good book. Now that I'm thinking about it more and more. But it's just not a thriller. So those are the books that I read in January. And like I said, it was such a good reading month, and with only 1 DNF and only 1 disappointment, the rest was just good, and few of them were so good. Yeah, I'm just very excited about the year. I mean, it's definitely starting off super well and positively. So, here's to it continuing on like that throughout the year. But I do hope you enjoyed, and if you've read any of these books, please talk about it in the comments. And I would love to hear your thoughts about it for sure. Or maybe you can also tell me what was your favorite book that you read in the month of January. Yeah, thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again in my next video. Bye bye.